Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome. This is the CLG Grants and Tax Credits session. This is going to be a very quick overview of some financial assistance programs that may be available for projects in your city or town. I'm Katie Pomplun. I'm the Grants and CLG Coordinator for RIHPHC, and I'll be discussing the CLG program, while my colleague Ginger Hesse, Staff Architect, will be giving some information on federal tax credits. So as a quick reminder, for open meetings purposes, this program is for educational purposes only. Members of public bodies, such as HDCs, are reminded not to discuss and/or act on a matter over which the public body has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. So we'll take questions at the end, but the session is only 20 minutes, so whatever questions we can't get to right now, I'd encourage you to bring up in the open forum Q&A 4 o'clock today. So let's dive in because time is short. I'm going to start with CLG grants. Okay. And all right, so the basics. This is an annual grant program. The commission receives about $600,000 to $650,000 a year from NPS to fund our operations, and we're required by law to pass through 10% of that funding to certified local government communities in the form of these grants. So at the moment, there's about $60,000 to $65,000 available for these grants every year. Applications are always released in the fall, and they're typically due in late December. So the awards are made the following spring, and then the project periods typically last about 15 months. So for example, June 1st of this year through September 30th of next year. What can CLG grants fund? They can't fund acquisition or actual construction, bricks and mortar restoration costs. What they typically fund is studies, plans, programs, tools that help a community implement their preservation programs. So we've got survey and evaluation reports, National Register nominations, both for individual buildings, historic districts, resource-specific activities like conditions assessments, historic structures reports, feasibility studies, master plans, interpretive plans, disaster planning. They can also fund development or revision of ordinances or development of standards and guidelines for your HDC. Completion of the historic preservation element of your comprehensive plan is also eligible, as is public outreach related to any or all of the above. So for example, you could get a grant for funding for printing and mailing of new standards and guidelines for distribution to your property owners in your HDC. Historic District Commission training, and in some cases scholarships, is also eligible for grant funding. So we rank all applications that we receive based on a rubric that considers the relative need of a project in a city or town, the significance of the resources involved, and the impact of the project on the local community. So in recent years, we've also made use of sort of a special consideration category of points. That's related to criteria that we hope will help to advance the goals of our new state preservation plan, which was updated in 2020 and is currently under review by the National Park Service. So for example, in 2021, projects that would help communities plan for threats related to climate change or sea level rise received special consideration, as did projects that would promote the recognition of resources associated with underrepresented communities. Who can apply? Any Rhode Island municipality with CLG status can apply for these grants. So there are 18 of them. You can see the list here. CLGs are communities that have historic district zoning, a qualified historic district commission, and have entered into an agreement with the commission that is then approved by the National Park Service. So no entity other than the local government can apply, but there is an option with these grants for a city or town to apply on behalf of a third-party organization and then defer management of the grant to that third party. So this can lead to some really creative uses of funding, especially in cases where the city or town planning department doesn't feel they have the capacity to manage a project, or even just in cases where the city or town is home to a great organization that could use this funding for their own purposes. So for a real life example, in 2017, the city of Providence applied for funding to complete a structural assessment of Knight Memorial Library, but with the understanding that if the grant were to be awarded, 100% of the funding, administration, and responsibilities would be deferred to Providence Community Library to essentially manage their own project. And we see projects like this in our applications every year, and they tend to be extremely successful. Sharing resources across communities is also encouraged. So, for example, one CLG community could apply for a grant to host a training workshop, but to really broaden the impact of that funding, we would love to see a community then invite all local HGCs, to take part in that training workshop. So that is a super quick 30,000-foot view of the program. I'm interested, as always, in your thoughts on the program and what more you might like to see from it. Hopefully we'll have time to go over a few questions, but my contact information is also right there if you want to reach out to me directly. And with that, I will let Ginger talk about tax credits. Ginger?
Here I am.
There we go.
It's coming. It takes a minute. Okay. I'm going to talk to you about this great program that's been in existence. And this is the federal program since 1976. And I'm hearing everything twice here, so bear with me. This is a federal program that provides an incentive to a property owner to do a rehabilitation that meets the Secretary of the Interior standards. It's valued at 20% of the cost of rehabilitating the building. It is only available for substantial rehabilitations and must be for income-producing properties. No owner-occupied single-family dwellings need apply. Eligibility requirements. The property must be listed on the National Register or be in the process of getting listed. The rehabilitation must be substantial, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute. Must be for income-producing use, and the work must meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. So this is really an incentive program. You can't just do a rehab of an old building, but you have to do it. It's an incentive to do it the right way. So the substantial requirement is defined by the IRS is an investment that equals or exceeds the adjusted basis of the building. So that is either 100% of the cost of the building minus the value of the land when you purchased it, or if you've owned the building for a long time, you can have depreciated the building and the investment will be much less. So some of the buildings that can qualify are large mill complexes converted to apartments or office space, and those, I'm sure you've seen many of them across Rhode Island because they have such a big impact on the community where they exist. Downtown commercial blocks. I think we've over time, over the life of the program, I think we've done every building in downtown Providence. Main Street buildings with storefronts below and apartments above. Multifamily dwellings and apartment buildings. Triple deckers would qualify. Hotels, and my personal favorite are white elephants, which include we've done a power plant, post office, car dealerships, department stores, theaters, few YMCAs, convents, schools, livery stables, and a cranberry barn. And I have a couple of pictures for inspiration. If I can pull them up. Okay, this is an old school that was in Providence that was vacant for decades and was rehabbed a few years ago for apartments, and it's just beautiful. And here's our power plant, which South Street Landing. I'm sure you've all seen it, but it was vacant for a very long time, and now it's a nursing school and office space for Brown University. And this is the Narragansett Reading Room, which in the before picture on the left was actually owned by the same owner who rehabilitated it for a long time. So in this case, their investment, having depreciated the building, was much less in order to qualify as a substantial rehab. But they did a beautiful exterior rehabilitation and some interior rehab as well. So that is my summary of the federal program. The state tax credit program piggybacks on it pretty much and is also worth 20%. But unfortunately, because the General Assembly hasn't refunded the program, it's just winding down very slowly and there's no new money in it. So hopefully the General Assembly will see fit to invest that program, and we will continue with the state tax credit program. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie because I'm hearing myself talking.
Yeah, I'm sorry you're dealing with that echo, Ginger. Thank you very much for that presentation. So yeah, we've got about 10 minutes to entertain questions if anyone has any questions or comments on either of these two programs. Ginger, if you want to go ahead and unshare your screen too, I'll pop us up a little bigger. There we go. Thanks. I don't see any Q&A over here. Ginger, someone has mentioned that the Superman building would make a great historic tax credit project, a great white elephant for you.
We actually have had a Part 1 application for that building for a long time. It will someday make a perfect project. I think the ideal plan in my mind would be to rehabilitate the upper floors for residential use and keep the lower floors for commercial use. And I think it will happen. I'm confident.
Yeah, I'll just mention too, although both of these programs, are not necessarily for the same thing, or one wouldn't necessarily lead to another, there are some ways to look at it. Like we've had a couple situations where, for example, one might use a CLG grant to fund a feasibility study for either a town-owned building or a vacant property in a city or town. And if that feasibility study has great results, say, hey, look what you might be able to do here, wave that around in front of some developers and say, hey, if you get in here and rehab this building, you might have this 20% federal tax credit available to you. So just one way to think creatively about potentially playing the programs off of each other. Let's see. I don't see anything in the Q&A, so. Another thing I'm noticing with CLG grants too is that amount that we have available, and again, it's available annually, great. So it's predictable, it's always there for the most part, that number is going up. We've been lucky to see increases to the amount of federal funding that we receive at RIHPHC in recent years, which trickles down to additional funding available for these CLG grants. So I'm excited to see that hopefully continue and hopefully be able to offer more for that program too. Let's see. All right, we have a question. How do buildings get on the National Register? And as HDC members, do we know if the building is on the NR? Well, so let me just read this back again and answer that. Okay. So as an HDC member, if you're curious about whether or not a building in your city or town is on the National Register, we can help you with that. We could look that up in our database at any time. There is some inconsistency. Sometimes a local historic district, a property that's within your jurisdiction is also on the National Register. Sometimes the boundaries of what's in the National Register district and what's not are a little murky, or they don't line up exactly. So it's definitely something you'd want to confirm, because as Ginger mentioned, to be eligible for that tax credit program, you do have to be, the building does have to be on the National Register, listed on the National Register after it goes through a nomination process where our office, our state review board, has to approve it. Typically, a professional architectural historian will write the nomination and sort of shepherd it through that process. A National Register nomination is eligible for CLG grant funding. So if there's a project that one might have in mind for tax credits that isn't listed but could be eligible, you know, a town could potentially apply to us for funding to do that nomination as sort of that first step. Are CLG grants available to all states? And someone said Massachusetts. Yeah, so every state has a state historic preservation office, and every state receives that federal funding annually from the National Park Service. So every single one does have a CLG program. Now the question is which cities and towns are eligible. I don't know off the top of my head how many Massachusetts cities and towns are CLGs. I do know in Rhode Island it's 18. But yeah, there's definitely a CLG grant program in every state. Right, so we are running a little short on time here. We've got 4 minutes till 3 o'clock, but we've got a little bit more time to answer questions if anyone else has anything before the next session. Oh, I see one in the chat to add. Oh, go ahead, Chair.
Oh no, now that I can hear myself, I did want to say that the tax credit can be a good incentive to encourage an HDC applicant and a property owner to do good rehabilitation if they qualify. It's, you know, it's the carrot and the stick. This is the carrot. It's nice to be able to offer them something that they might not have known about.
Definitely. I see another question here in the chat. Are these grants or credits allowed for private ownership of property? So one that would be a mixed use kind of structure. I can speak for CLG grants. The ownership, you know, doesn't really play into it as much as who's applying and who's going to be managing the grant. So in this case, we'd be looking for, you know, a city or town to manage that project. That said, I did mention how we evaluate for impact. A property that's privately owned and a private owner who stands to benefit from the grant project means that we may look at that as having less public impact, less of a greater impact as another competitive grant application in the queue. But it would, and then let's see, here we go. What are the chances, do you think, Ginger, for RI or Rhode Island refunding the state tax credit program, which unfortunately has not made a lot of progress?
We have a new governor, and he comes from a town that has a CLG, right? So he may be more, I'm hoping that he'll be more sympathetic to the program than our previous governor, who was more interested in the rebuild RI credits, which are totally different. So I'm optimistic. I think we have as good a chance as any this year as we have in recent years.
Sure. All right, so just 2 minutes left here. I've got some people asking where we can find more information. So we do have some more information about CLG grants on our website, so preservation.ri.gov. NPS, the National Park Service, does have more information about CLGs writ broadly on their website. You can find out more there too about the process of becoming a CLG. You can also reach out to us at any time. I see someone who says they're an architectural consultant who's often asked about these programs. You can feel free to call us. We're definitely available to weigh in on that. Let's see.
We do have information on our website, and there's also a link to the National Park Service website that has everything you could possibly want to know about the federal tax credit.
Perfect. Okay, well, I think we will leave it there so that everyone has time to get up and get a drink and then get to the 3 o'clock session. But thank you everyone for attending. I hope that was helpful. And if we didn't have time to get to your question today, we do have that open forum Q&A today at 4:10, sort of an Ask Us Anything session. So we hope to see you there, and we look forward to answering more of your questions. Enjoy. Take care.
Bye.